He thought he had the perfect crime, a beautiful mistress on his arm, a reservation at the city's most exclusive table, and a pregnant wife safely tucked away at home. Imelda was a man who believed the rules didn't apply to him. But karma has a funny way of serving cold dishes. Tonight, amidst the clinking of crystal and the hum of jazz, his arrogance is about to shatter. Because the woman sitting at the VIP table, the one laughing with the billionaire CEO Imelda, was desperate to impress, wasn't a stranger, it was his wife. And she wasn't just dining, she was finalizing his destruction. The valet at l'Orangerie knew better than to ask for keys. When the matte black Bentley Bentayga rolled up to the curb, the young man in the crisp burgundy uniform simply opened the door, bowing his head slightly, as polished Italian leather shoes hit the pavement. Imelda adjusted his cuffs, the platinum Patek Philippe on his wrist catching the ambient streetlights of downtown Chicago. He took a deep breath of the cold November air. It smelled of money. It smelled of success. At 36, Imelda felt he had conquered the world. He was the regional director of Apex Logistics, a company on the verge of a massive merger, and he looked every bit the part. "Richie, it's freezing," a voice whined from the passenger side. Imelda moved around the car, his annoyance flickering for only a microsecond before he plastered on his charming smile. He opened the door for Amber. Amber was 22, a model with an Instagram following that eclipsed the population of some small countries, and a taste for drama that was starting to grate on Imelda's nerves. But she was stunning, blonde, statuesque, and currently wrapped in a white fox fur coat that had cost Imelda his quarterly bonus. "Patience, darling," Imelda soothed, offering his arm. "The heat inside is set to perfection, just like the wine list." She hooked her arm through his, her long, manicured nails digging slightly into his cashmere coat. "You promised me the tasting menu," she whispered, leaning close. "And you promised we wouldn't run into anyone boring." "This is l'Orangerie, Amber." "Boring people can't afford the appetizers here," Imelda chuckled darkly. As they walked toward the heavy oak doors, Imelda's phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. He knew who it was. It was Catherine, his wife. Catherine was currently 8 months pregnant, likely sitting on their oversized beige sectional in their suburban mansion, wearing sweatpants and watching reruns of reality TV. She had become heavy, slow. All she talked about was the nursery colors, sage green or soft gray, and her swollen ankles. Imelda felt a pang of guilt, but he crushed it instantly under the heel of his ego. He deserved this. He worked hard. He provided the mansion, the drivers, the lifestyle. Didn't he deserve a night of excitement? A night with Amber, who smelled like Chanel No. 5, and didn't ask him about diaper pails. "Reservation for Mr. Iphigenia. Sorry, Mr. Blackwood," Imelda corrected himself at the host stand. He had almost said the name of the man he idolized, Alexander Iphigenia, the CEO he was dying to meet. Freud would have had a field day. The maitre d', a man with a mustache so sharp it could cut glass, checked the tablet. "Ah, Mr. Blackwood. Table 14, near the piano. Excellent choice." They were led through the dining room. It was a cathedral of wealth. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling like frozen tears. The carpet was so thick it silenced their footsteps. Imelda scanned the room, a habit of the insecure. He was checking for 2 things: people more important than him to envy, and people less important than him to scorn. He saw the VP of Chase Bank in the corner. He saw a senator near the window. Good. He was in the right company. "I love it here," Amber cooed, shrugging off her fur coat to reveal a slip dress that left very little to the imagination. Several heads turned. Imelda swelled with pride. This was the trophy. This was the prize. "Nothing but the best," Imelda said, taking his seat. The waiter arrived instantly with water and menus bound in calfskin. Imelda ordered a bottle of Chateau Margaux 2009 without looking at the price. He wanted to impress Amber, sure, but mostly he wanted to prove to himself that he could. "So," Amber said, tracing the rim of her water glass, "when are you going to tell her?" The mood chilled instantly. Imelda sighed, picking up the menu to use as a shield. "Amber, we talked about this. Not tonight. She's due in 4 weeks. I can't leave her right before the baby comes. It would look bad." "Bad for who?" Amber challenged, her eyes narrowing. "Bad for your reputation? Or are you just scared of her?" Imelda laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "Scared of Catherine. Please, Catherine is a mouse. She hasn't worked in 5 years. She barely leaves the house. Without me, she's nothing. I just don't want the legal headache right now." It was a lie, of course. He didn't want the divorce because Catherine's father had been the one to give him his start in the industry. The old man was dead now, but his connections still lingered. And Catherine handled everything Imelda didn't want to do. She paid the bills, managed the staff, organized his schedule. She was useful. "Just wait until after the merger," Imelda lied smoothly. "Once I get the promotion to Global VP, I'll have the capital to settle her out quietly. Then it's just you and me." Amber seemed satisfied, or at least distracted by the arrival of the amuse-bouche. Imelda relaxed. He was safe. He was powerful. He was untouchable. Then he heard the laugh. It was a laugh he hadn't heard in years. It wasn't the tired, soft chuckle Catherine gave when they watched a movie. It was a bright, crystalline sound, full of genuine joy and a hint of something else. Confidence. Imelda froze, his fork hovering halfway to his mouth. "What?" Amber asked, noticing his sudden paralysis. "Is the truffle bad?" "Shh," Imelda hissed. He turned his head slowly, scanning the upper tier of the restaurant, the VIP section known as the balcony. It was elevated 3 steps above the main floor, reserved for the city's true elite, the billionaires, the old money, the people who owned the buildings Imelda just worked in. There, at the center table, sat a woman. She was facing away from him, but he knew that profile. He knew the curve of that neck, but everything else was wrong. The woman was wearing a dress Imelda had never seen, a midnight blue velvet gown that hugged her form perfectly, draping elegantly over her pregnancy bump in a way that made her look like a fertility goddess rather than a tired housewife. Her hair, usually tied back in a messy bun, was cascading in loose, glossy waves down her back. She was wearing diamonds, earrings that caught the chandelier light and threw fire across the room. Real diamonds. Large ones. Imelda squinted. "It can't be," he told himself. "Catherine is at home. I saw her in her pajamas at 6 p.m. She said she was ordering Thai food and going to sleep." The woman turned her head slightly to speak to the waiter, and Imelda felt the blood drain from his face. It was Catherine. But it wasn't the Catherine he knew. This woman radiated power. She was glowing. She gestured with a grace he had forgotten she possessed. "Imelda," Amber's voice was getting shrill, "you're staring at that pregnant woman like you want to sleep with her. It's creepy." "That's my wife," Imelda whispered, the words choking him. Amber dropped her fork. It clattered loudly against the china. "Excuse me. You said she was a frump who barely leaves the couch." "She is. I don't know what this is." Panic began to claw at Imelda's throat. What was she doing here? How did she get a reservation? L'Orangerie had a 3-month waiting list, and the VIP balcony. You couldn't just book that. You had to be invited. And then the person sitting opposite Catherine leaned forward, coming into the light. Imelda stopped breathing. The man was older, perhaps in his late 50s, with silver hair swept back and a jawline that looked like it was carved from granite. He was wearing a bespoke tuxedo that cost more than Imelda's car. He held a glass of whiskey with an air of casual dominance. It was Alexander Iphigenia. The Alexander Iphigenia, the CEO of Iphigenia Global, the conglomerate that was rumored to be buying Imelda's company. The man Imelda had spent 6 months trying to get a 5-minute meeting with, only to be rejected by 3 different secretaries. And there he was, pouring sparkling water into Catherine's glass, smiling at her with genuine warmth and respect. "No way," Imelda muttered, his mind racing. "This is a hallucination. Maybe the stress." "Is that the guy you have a poster of in your office?" Amber asked snidely. "Shut up, Amber." Imelda's mind was spinning. Was Catherine having an affair with a billionaire? No, that was impossible. Catherine was plain, safe, boring. Why would a shark like Iphigenia waste time with a suburban housewife? Unless Imelda didn't know his wife at all. "We have to go," Imelda said, standing up abruptly. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Sit down," Amber hissed. "I just ordered the lobster. We are not leaving. If that's your wife, go over there and confront her. Be a man." "Confront her? That's Alexander Iphigenia. If I make a scene in front of him, my career is over." "Well, if you don't do something, she is going to see you," Amber pointed out. "We are literally in her line of sight if she turns her head 10 degrees to the left." Imelda sank back into his chair, sliding down as low as he could. He grabbed the menu and held it up, peering over the top like a spy in a bad movie. He watched them. Catherine was speaking now, her hands moving expressively. She looked professional. She wasn't talking about diapers. She pulled a sleek silver tablet out of her clutch, a clutch he didn't recognize, and slid it across the table to Iphigenia. Iphigenia put on a pair of reading glasses, looked at the screen, and nodded. He looked impressed. He said something, pointed at the screen, and then reached across the table to shake Catherine's hand. It wasn't a romantic touch. It was a business handshake. Firm. Equal. "What is happening?" Imelda whispered, sweat beading on his forehead. "Maybe she's selling him Tupperware," Amber giggled. "This isn't funny," Imelda snapped. "Iphigenia is about to acquire my company. If Catherine knows him, if she says something bad about me..." He suddenly remembered the argument they'd had that morning. He had called her lazy. He had told her she contributed nothing to this family. He had told her she was lucky he stuck around because no one else would want a whale like her. He felt sick. "I need to hear what they are saying," Imelda decided. He looked around. The layout of the restaurant was open, but there was a large potted fern separating the lower tier from the VIP balcony. If he went to the restroom, he would have to pass right by the fern. If he lingered there for a second... "I'm going to the bathroom," Imelda said, standing up again. "You're pathetic," Amber muttered, pouring herself more wine. Imelda smoothed his jacket, kept his head down, and walked toward the back of the restaurant. As he neared the balcony, he slowed his pace. He pretended to check his phone, stopping just behind the heavy velvet curtain and the fern, only 5 feet away from table 14. He could hear them clearly now. "The projections for Q3 are solid, Alex," Catherine's voice said. It was crisp, authoritative. "But if you proceed with the acquisition of Apex Logistics, you need to be aware of the internal rot." Imelda's heart stopped. She was talking about his company. "I suspected as much," Iphigenia's deep baritone rumbled. "The numbers looked too good to be true. Who is the weak link?" Imelda held his breath. Please don't say it. Please don't say it. Catherine took a sip of her water. The regional management is incompetent, specifically the Chicago branch. They're cooking the books on shipping times to inflate bonuses. It's sloppy, and it's a liability. The Chicago branch, Imelda's branch. I see, Iphigenia said. And the director? Imelda Blackwood? Your husband? There was a silence, a long, heavy silence. Imelda closed his eyes, praying, Defend me, Catherine. Tell him I'm a hard worker. Tell him I'm the best. Imelda, Catherine said, her voice dropping to a tone Imelda had never heard, cold, detached, and utterly ruthless. Imelda is a liability you can't afford, Alex. But don't worry about him. By the time the acquisition goes through on Monday, he won't be a problem anymore. Oh? Iphigenia raised an eyebrow. You have a plan? I don't just have a plan. Catherine smiled, and the sight of it made Imelda's blood run cold. I have the evidence, and I have the divorce papers. Tonight is just the victory lap. Imelda stumbled back, his foot catching on the edge of the carpet. He flailed, grabbing the velvet curtain for support. The heavy fabric tore from one of its hooks with a loud R.I.P., and Imelda stumbled right into the open view of the VIP balcony. Catherine turned. Alexander Iphigenia turned. For a moment, time stood still. Imelda, sweaty, pale, and looking guilty as sin, locked eyes with his pregnant wife. She didn't look surprised. She didn't look scared. She slowly picked up her glass, raised it in a mock toast, and mouthed one word. Gotcha. The silence that followed Imelda's clumsy entrance into the VIP section was heavy enough to crush a lesser man. Unfortunately for Imelda, his ego was structural, built to withstand immense pressure, even when logic dictated he should be crumbling. He straightened his jacket, brushing off a piece of lint with a trembling hand, and decided to play the only card he had left. Offense. Catherine, he said, his voice straining for authority, but landing somewhere near shrill. What on earth are you doing here? You told me you were at home, resting. Is this— He gestured vaguely between her and Alexander Iphigenia. Is this appropriate? A married woman, 8 months pregnant, drinking with a stranger? He hoped to shame her. He hoped to make her cower, to apologize, to scurry away so he could salvage the situation with Iphigenia. But Catherine didn't cower. She didn't even blink. She merely cut a piece of her sea bass, brought it to her lips, chewed slowly, and swallowed before turning her gaze to him. Her eyes were not the soft, pleading eyes he was used to. They were hard, dark flint. I'm having a business dinner, Imelda, she said calmly. Something you're interrupting. Business? Imelda scoffed, a nervous laugh bubbling up. What business? You haven't worked a day since the honeymoon. You arrange flowers and supervise the cleaning crew. Don't lie to me. He turned to Alexander Iphigenia, flashing his most ingratiating salesman smile. Mr. Iphigenia, I must apologize for my wife. The hormones— Pregnancy brain, you know how it is. She gets confused. I'm Imelda Blackwood, director at Apex. We've been emailing. Imelda extended his hand. Alexander Iphigenia looked at the hand as if it were a dead fish. He didn't move. He leaned back in his leather chair, swirling his whiskey, a look of profound amusement dancing in his eyes. We haven't been emailing, Imelda, Iphigenia said, his voice deep and smooth like rolling thunder. My assistant's assistant has been deleting your emails. There's a difference. Imelda's hand dropped. His face burned crimson. Before he could recover, the sound of heels clicking rapidly on the stairs announced Amber's arrival. She burst onto the balcony, her white fur coat slipping off one shoulder, a glass of wine in her hand. "Richie!" she whined, loud enough for the entire restaurant to hear. You left me alone with the bread basket. It's rude." She stopped, looking from Imelda to the table. Her eyes landed on Catherine. Amber looked the older woman up and down, sneering at the lack of makeup, the practical bun, which was now loose, and the baby bump. "Oh," Amber laughed, a cruel, tinkling sound. "Is this her? The mouse?" Imelda closed his eyes. "No, shut up, Amber." Amber sashayed forward, placing a possessive hand on Imelda's chest. "She's huge, Richie. You didn't say she was this wide. No wonder you're bored." The air in the restaurant seemed to vanish. Several diners at nearby tables gasped. Even the piano player faltered for a beat. Catherine looked at Amber. There was no jealousy in her expression, only pity. "And who might this be?" Catherine asked, her voice dangerously soft. "I'm the future," Amber declared, flipping her hair. "I'm the one he takes to five-star restaurants while you sit at home swelling up. I'm the one who knows about the promotion. I'm the one helping him spend his bonus." "Amber, stop!" Imelda hissed, grabbing her arm. "Not now." "Why?" Amber pulled away. "You said you were going to divorce her after the merger. Why wait? Let's just tell her now." "Look at her, Imelda. She's pathetic, sitting here trying to pretend she's important just because she found some old sugar daddy to buy her dinner." She gestured dismissively at Alexander Iphigenia. Iphigenia set his glass down. The sound was sharp, like a gavel hitting a block. "Young lady," Iphigenia said, his tone icy, "I would suggest you lower your voice. You are speaking to the most powerful woman in the logistics industry." Amber blinked. "What? Her?" She pointed a manicured finger at Catherine. "She's a housewife." "Is that what you told her, Imelda?" Iphigenia asked, shifting his gaze to the sweating husband. "Did you tell her that Catherine is just a housewife? Did you tell her that the only reason you have a job at Apex is because Catherine's father founded the company? Did you tell her that the only reason you haven't been fired for incompetence is because Catherine has been quietly fixing your mistakes from home for 5 years?" Imelda felt the floor tilting. "That's not true," he stammered. "I'm the director. I run the Chicago branch." "You occupy the office," Catherine corrected him. She picked up her napkin and dabbed her mouth. "But who writes the quarterly strategy reports, Imelda? Who drafts the pitch decks for the investors? You bring them home, complaining about the workload, and I edit them. I rewrite them from scratch while you sleep. I've been running your department from our kitchen table since 2020. You help out," Imelda whispered. "That's what wives do." "I don't help out," Catherine said. "I am the architect. And do you know why Mr. Iphigenia is here tonight?" Imelda shook his head, mute. "He's here to buy Apex," Catherine said. "But he had one condition for the sale. He wanted to know who K.V. Blackwood was. He noticed that the internal metadata on all the best strategy documents didn't match your user profile. It matched mine." Iphigenia nodded. "I don't do business with figureheads, Imelda. I do business with brains. I asked Catherine to meet me to discuss her vision for the company post-acquisition. I was prepared to offer her a consultancy role." "And?" Imelda asked, his voice barely audible. "And," Iphigenia smiled wolfishly, "after hearing her analysis of the current management, specifically your fraudulent shipping logs, I've decided to offer her something better. But we can get to that later." Imelda felt like he was drowning. His entire reality, his genius, his self-made success, was being dismantled brick by brick. "This is ridiculous," Amber scoffed, though she looked unsure now. "Richie, tell them they're lying. You're the boss. You bought me this dress with your corporate card." Catherine's eyes snapped to Imelda. "You used the corporate card for that?" Imelda flinched. It was A business expense. Client entertainment. She's not a client, Imelda, Catherine said. She's a liability. And as of 5 minutes ago, that card has been flagged. Flagged? Imelda tried to laugh, but it came out as a dry cough. You can't flag my card, Catherine. I'm the regional director. I have full spending autonomy. Actually, Iphigenia interjected, enjoying the show, corporate credit lines are subject to oversight by the board, and since Catherine controls the voting block of the family trust, which still owns 40% of Apex shares, she technically has oversight over you. You own 40%? Imelda gaped. Your father left that to me. He said I was the successor. He left you the title, Catherine corrected, leaning forward, her baby bump pressing against the white tablecloth. He left the equity to his daughter. He wanted to make sure I was protected in case I married a man who, I don't know, spent company funds on strippers and furs. I'm a model, Amber shrieked. Sit down, Amber, Imelda snapped, the stress finally breaking his facade. Just shut up for a second. Don't talk to me like that, Amber yelled. I'm leaving. This is boring and you're acting like a loser. I'm taking the car. She turned to storm off, reaching into Imelda's pocket to grab the keys to the Bentley. Actually, Catherine said, her voice stopping Amber in her tracks, you might want to call an Uber. The Bentley is leased under the company name. If you take it, I'll have reported it stolen before you reach the first traffic light. Amber froze. She looked at the keys in her hand, then at the furious, sweating man she thought was her ticket to the good life, and finally at the pregnant woman sipping sparkling water. Amber dropped the keys on the table. They landed with a heavy thud next to the bread plate. You're a joke, Imelda, Amber spat. You told me you owned the company. You're just an employee, and a bad one. She didn't wait for a response. She turned and marched out of the restaurant, the eyes of every patron following her exit. The silence she left behind was deafening. Imelda stood there, stripped of his arm candy, his dignity, and his delusions. He looked at Catherine, hoping to see a crack in her armor, hoping to see the woman who used to rub his feet after work. Katie, he tried, using her pet name. Look, this has all been a misunderstanding. The stress of the merger. I made mistakes. I admit it. But we're a team, right? We're having a baby. You can't do this to the father of your child. The father of my child, Catherine mused. Yes. That's the only reason you aren't in handcuffs right now. I convinced Alex not to call the FBI regarding the embezzlement. Yet. Embezzlement? Imelda squeaked. It was creative accounting. Everyone does it. Padding shipping costs by 15% and diverting the surplus to an offshore account in the Caymans isn't creative accounting, Imelda, Iphigenia said, pulling a file from his briefcase. It's a felony. We have the wire transfers. We have the account numbers. We even have the photos of you withdrawing cash in Georgetown last May when you said you were at a logistics conference in Denver. Imelda gripped the back of a chair to keep from collapsing. They knew everything. So here is how tonight is going to end, Catherine said, her voice devoid of emotion. You are going to go back to your table. You are going to finish your dinner alone. Then you are going to go to a hotel. Do not come home. The locks have already been changed. You can't kick me out of my own house. My house, Catherine corrected. My father bought it. The deed is in my name. You're just a guest who overstayed his welcome. Imelda looked around the room. People were whispering, pointing. He saw the VP of Chase Bank shaking his head in disgust. He was ruined. Catherine, please, Imelda begged, his voice cracking. I'll do anything. I'll cut off Amber. I'll go to therapy. Just don't destroy me. "You destroyed yourself, Imelda," she said softly. "I just stopped cleaning up the mess." She waved her hand dismissively, a gesture that signaled the audience was over. Imelda, trembling, turned around. He walked back to his table. Table 14, the one he had been so proud of. The waiter was there, holding a black leather bill folder. "Sir," the waiter said, his face a mask of professional politeness, though his eyes were cold. "The lady who just left, she ordered 3 bottles of the Dom Perignon to go before she stormed out, and you have the Chateau Margaux open." "Fine, fine," Imelda muttered, pulling out his sleek black Amex Centurion card, the company card. He threw it on the tray. "Just run it." He sat down, pouring himself a glass of the wine that now tasted like vinegar. He watched Catherine and Iphigenia resume their conversation, as if he didn't exist. They were laughing again. The waiter returned a minute later. He didn't hand the folder back. He held the card between 2 fingers, looking at it with disdain. "I'm sorry, sir," the waiter said, loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. "This card has been declined. The terminal says, 'Stolen, fraud alert, confiscate.'" "What?" Imelda stood up. "Try it again. That's a mistake." "I tried it 3 times, sir. It's declined. And per the issuer's instructions, I have to keep the card." The waiter slipped the black metal card into his pocket. "Do you have another form of payment? The bill comes to $4,300. Imelda patted his pockets. He had his personal debit card, but he knew exactly what was in that account. Maybe $500. He had moved everything else to the secret account that Catherine apparently knew about and had likely frozen. I don't have cash on me," Imelda stammered. "Sir," the waiter's voice hardened. "Do we need to call the police? This is theft of services." From the balcony, a voice floated down. It was Iphigenia. "Put it on my tab, Jean-Pierre," Iphigenia called out. Imelda looked up, humiliation burning his skin like acid. Iphigenia wasn't doing it to be nice. He was doing it to show who owned whom. "But," Iphigenia continued, raising his voice so the whole room could hear, "add a 25% tip for your trouble, and make sure Mr. Blackwood packs up his leftovers. He's going to need them. He's currently unemployed." The restaurant erupted in low laughter. Imelda sank into his chair, wishing the floor would open up and swallow him whole. He looked at Catherine one last time. She wasn't even looking at him. She was looking at the future, a future that didn't include him. But Imelda Blackwood was a narcissist, and narcissists don't go down quietly. As he sat there, consumed by shame, a dark, twisted thought began to form in his mind. If he was going to lose everything, he was going to make sure she lost something too. He knew something about the merger that even Catherine didn't know. A poison pill he had buried in the contracts months ago, just in case. He pulled out his phone. He had one move left. Imelda didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. After the humiliation at l'Orangerie, he had checked into a budget motel near the airport, a stark contrast to the 5-star suites he was accustomed to. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and regret. The fluorescent light in the bathroom flickered with a maddening buzz. But Imelda wasn't wallowing in self-pity anymore. He was running on pure, uncut adrenaline and rage. He sat on the lumpy mattress, his laptop glowing in the darkness, scrolling furiously through encrypted files. Catherine thought she had won. She thought stripping him of his credit cards and his house was the end of it. She had forgotten one crucial detail. Imelda was a paranoid man, and paranoid men always have a backup plan. "There it is," Imelda whispered, a twisted smile stretching across his face. He pulled up a PDF document titled Project Jericho. 6 months ago, When rumours of the acquisition first started circulating, Imelda had grown fearful. He knew his numbers were cooked. He knew that if a due diligence team looked too closely, they would find the cracks. So, he had buried a clause deep within the vendor exclusivity contracts for the entire Midwest region. It was a legal landmine. Clause 14b. In the event of a change in ownership or executive leadership, without the express written consent of the acting regional director, Imelda Blackwood, all exclusivity agreements with major shipping partners are immediately voided, incurring a termination penalty of $50 million payable to the consulting firm Blackwood Holdings, LLC. It was dirty. It was likely illegal. But it was signed, notarized, and buried in 4,000 pages of legal jargon that he was sure Catherine hadn't read. She handled strategy and internal logs, not vendor contracts. Those were his domain. If they fired him, or if Iphigenia bought the company without paying Imelda off, the clause would trigger. Apex Logistics would be hit with a $50 million debt instantly, bankrupting the Chicago branch and tanking the stock price of Iphigenia's company before the ink was even dry. "You want a war, Catherine?" Imelda muttered, slamming the laptop shut. "I'll give you a nuclear winter." He checked his watch. 6 a.m. The final board meeting to sign the acquisition deal was scheduled for 9 a.m. at the Apex headquarters downtown. Imelda stood up and walked to the mirror. He looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot, his stubble was graying, and he was wearing the same tuxedo from the night before, now wrinkled and stained with wine. He didn't care. He wasn't going there to look pretty. He was going there to hold the company hostage. He splashed cold water on his face, slicked back his hair, and grabbed his briefcase. He had nothing left to lose. If he went down, he was taking the whole empire with him. Or they would cut him a check for $20 million to make him go away. He liked those odds. He drove his own car, an older sedan he kept in storage, not the company Bentley, to the office. As he pulled up to the glass skyscraper, he saw the press vans. The news of the merger was big. Reporters were swarming the entrance. Perfect. An audience. Imelda bypassed the main lobby, knowing his badge had likely been deactivated. He used the loading dock entrance, flashing an old security pass at a new guard who didn't know any better. He took the freight elevator up to the 40th floor. The elevator rattled as it ascended. Imelda's heart pounded in rhythm with the gears. They think I'm gone. They think I'm beaten. The doors opened. The hallway was quiet. The executive boardroom was at the end of the hall. Through the frosted glass walls he could see silhouettes. He could see Alexander Iphigenia standing at the head of the table. He could see Catherine sitting to his right. Imelda adjusted his tie, took a deep breath, and marched down the hall. He didn't knock. He threw the double doors open with a crash that echoed like a gunshot. The room went silent. 12 people sat around the massive mahogany table, lawyers, board members, and executives. Alexander Iphigenia was mid-sentence, a gold fountain pen in his hand. Catherine was seated next to him, looking immaculate in a cream-colored power suit, her hands resting gently on her baby bump. They all turned to look at the disheveled man standing in the doorway. "Imelda," Catherine said, her voice calm, devoid of surprise. "You're trespassing. Security has been notified." "Call them," Imelda barked, striding into the room and slamming his briefcase onto the table. "Call the police. Call the press. Call the president for all I care. But don't sign that paper, Iphigenia." Alexander Iphigenia capped his pen slowly. He looked at Imelda with an expression one might use for a cockroach that had scurried across a dinner plate. "Mr. Blackwood," Iphigenia said, "you look unwell. Perhaps you should seek medical attention." "I don't need a doctor. I need a payout," Imelda shouted. He opened his briefcase and pulled out the crumpled copy of Project Jericho. He tossed it toward Iphigenia. "Read it. Clause 14B, the Midwest Vendor Agreement." The lawyers at the table stiffened. They began frantically whispering to each other. "If you sign that acquisition deal," Imelda announced, his voice trembling with manic energy, "and if you remove me as director, that clause triggers. A $50 million penalty fee goes straight to my shell company. You buy Apex, you buy its debt. The stock will crash by noon. The only way to stop it is if I sign a waiver. And my signature costs $20 million. He leaned back, crossing his arms, a smug grin breaking through his haggard face. Checkmate. The room was deadly silent for 10 seconds. The lawyers were flipping through their tablets, looking for the document. Then a sound broke the silence. It was laughter, but it wasn't the nervous laughter of defeated men. It was Catherine. She was laughing softly, shaking her head as she looked down at her notepad. "What's so funny?" Imelda snapped. "You think I'm bluffing? It's legally binding, Catherine. I signed it with the vendors 3 months ago." Catherine stopped laughing. She looked up, her eyes sharp and bright. She didn't look at Imelda. She looked at the projection screen at the front of the room. "Alex," Catherine said, "would you mind pulling up Exhibit C?" Iphigenia nodded and pressed a button on the console. The screen flickered to life. It displayed a scanned document. It was the vendor agreement Imelda was talking about. "I know about the clause, Imelda," Catherine said, her voice steel. "I read it 4 months ago. You really thought you could hide a $50 million liability in a contract that goes through the central server, the server I manage? It doesn't matter if you know about it," Imelda yelled. "It's signed. The vendors agreed to it. You can't undo it without my signature." "Actually," Catherine said, standing up. She moved with a slow, deliberate grace, walking around the table until she was standing just a few feet from him. "I didn't try to undo it. I let you keep it there. In fact, I made sure the legal department didn't flag it." Imelda frowned. "Why?" "Because," Catherine smiled, "I needed you to attempt to enforce it." She pressed a button on a remote. The screen changed. It showed a video clip. It was grainy footage from a hidden camera inside Imelda's home office. It showed Imelda on the phone 3 months ago, audio from the screen. "Yeah, just set up the shell company in the Cayman Islands. Name it Blackwood Holdings. I'm going to funnel the penalty fee there if the merger happens. They won't know what hit them. It's pure profit." Imelda's face went white. That's illegal surveillance. You can't use that." "It's a nanny cam, Imelda," Catherine said. "We installed it to watch the dogs. You approved the installation. You just forgot it records audio." She turned to the board members. "Gentlemen, what you have just witnessed is Mr. Blackwood attempting to commit corporate extortion and securities fraud. He created a poison pill clause not to protect the company, but to enrich himself via a shell entity." "So," Imelda stammered, "the contract is still valid. You still have to pay." "No." The head lawyer for Iphigenia Global spoke up, adjusting his glasses. "We don't, because of the bad actor provision in the master vendor bylaws." Catherine nodded. 2 weeks ago, I met with all the major vendors, the trucking companies, the shipping lines. I showed them the evidence of your embezzlement. I showed them how you were skimming off the top of their contracts, too. Do you know what they did?" Imelda backed away toward the door. "What did they do?" "They signed a new addendum," Catherine said, slamming a file onto the table, "retroactively voiding any contracts signed by Imelda Blackwood on the grounds of executive malfeasance. Clause 14B doesn't exist anymore, Imelda. It was null and void the moment you stole your first dollar." Imelda felt the room spinning. His leverage was gone. His golden parachute was gone. But You walked in here," Iphigenia's voice boomed, "hoping to blackmail us for $20 million. Instead, you just confessed to a felony in front of 12 witnesses and a stenographer." Iphigenia pointed to the corner of the room. A court reporter was typing furiously. "And," Iphigenia added, checking his watch, "since you are no longer an employee, and you are currently threatening the board." The double doors opened again. This time it wasn't a waiter. 2 police officers walked in, followed by a man in a cheap suit holding a pair of handcuffs. "Imelda Blackwood?" the officer asked. Imelda looked at Catherine. He looked for mercy. He looked for the wife who had loved him, supported him, and built him up. Catherine looked back. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She simply placed a hand on her belly, protecting the future from the mistakes of the past. "Take him," Catherine said. As the officers grabbed Imelda's arms, he began to scream. "Catherine, you can't do this. I'm your husband. I made you." "You didn't make me, Imelda," Catherine called out as they dragged him into the hallway. "You just underestimated me." The walk from the executive boardroom to the flashing lights of the street below felt like a funeral procession for a life Imelda had taken 36 years to build. As the officers marched him through the open-plan office of Apex Logistics, time seemed to warp. The silence was absolute. Dozens of employees, people Imelda had yelled at, underpaid and dismissed as overhead, stood at their cubicles watching. He looked for pity in their eyes. He found none. He saw satisfied smirks. He saw cell phones raised, recording his downfall in 4K resolution. His assistant, a young woman he had made cry just that morning over a coffee order, offered a small, polite wave as the handcuffs clicked tighter around his wrists. "Mr. Blackwood," the officer muttered, pushing his head down as they exited the building. "Watch your head." The sensory overload outside was violent. The press had smelled blood. Microphones were shoved into his face like spears. "Did you really try to blackmail Alexander Iphigenia? Is it true your wife was the real brains behind the company? Mr. Blackwood, look this way. Give us a smile for the mug shot." Imelda was shoved into the back of a squad car. The leather was hard plastic, smelling of disinfectant and old sweat, a far cry from the heated massage seats of his Bentley. As the car pulled away, he caught one last glimpse of the glass tower. High up on the 40th floor, he imagined Catherine standing at the window, not watching him, but already redecorating his office. The legal slaughter. The weeks that followed were a blur of fluorescent lights and cheap suits. Imelda's assets had been frozen within an hour of his arrest. With no access to the offshore accounts, which Catherine had handed over to the FBI, and his personal accounts drained by the marital freeze, Imelda was forced to rely on a court-appointed attorney. His lawyer, a tired man named Mr. Henderson, who smelled perpetually of stale coffee, laid out the reality in a small, windowless interrogation room. "It's over, Imelda," Henderson said, tossing a thick file onto the metal table. "They have everything. The video of you setting up the shell company, the altered shipping logs, the witness testimony." "Witness testimony?" Imelda scoffed, trying to maintain his bravado. "Who? My staff? They're incompetent." "Not your staff," Henderson corrected, pulling out a deposition. "Amber." Imelda felt the air leave his lungs. "Amber? The girl from dinner?" Ms. Amber realized very quickly that being an accessory to wire fraud wasn't good for her modeling career, Henderson explained dryly. "She cut a deal. She gave the DA the text messages where you bragged about the poison pill contract. She painted you as the mastermind who manipulated her. She walks free. You don't." The betrayal stung worse than the handcuffs. The woman he had destroyed his marriage for had sold him out for immunity and a chance to appear on a reality TV show about dating reform. Imelda pleaded guilty. He had no choice. The judge, a stern woman who seemed to take personal offense at Imelda's arrogance, sentenced him to 8 years in a federal facility, citing a profound lack of remorse and a predatory nature. 6 months later, the Federal Correctional Institution in Oxford, Wisconsin, was a grey world. The sky was grey, the walls were grey, the food was a disturbing shade of beige. Imelda Blackwood, once a man who sent back steaks if they were 1 degree over medium rare, now sat in the noisy cafeteria, staring at a tray of lukewarm mystery meat and soggy corn. He wasn't the regional director here. He was inmate 74.92. He had lost 20 pounds, not from a gym routine, but from stress and the inedible food. He kept his head down. In the first week, he had tried to explain to his cellmate, a massive man in for racketeering, about his stock portfolio. That conversation had ended with Imelda sleeping on the floor without a pillow. He had learned his place. He was nobody. The communal television in the corner of the cafeteria was usually tuned to sports or soap operas, the only escape the inmates had. But today, the channel had been flipped to global business news. Imelda wasn't paying attention until he heard the voice. It was a voice that used to whisper "good night" to him, a voice that used to ask him about his day, a voice he had ignored for years. "Turn that up," someone shouted. Imelda looked up. His plastic fork dropped from his hand. There, on the screen, was Catherine. She was standing on the balcony of the New York Stock Exchange. The banner behind her read, "Iphigenia Blackwood, Global, Record Q4 Earnings." She looked breathtaking. The frumpy clothes were gone. She wore a sharp, tailored, crimson suit that screamed authority. Her hair fell in glossy waves around her shoulders. She didn't look tired. She looked energized, powerful. Standing next to her was Alexander Iphigenia, looking at her with undisguised pride. And in Catherine's arms, wearing a tiny baby tuxedo and noise-cancelling headphones, was a baby boy, Imelda's son. The camera zoomed in. The baby had Imelda's nose. He had Imelda's chin. But he would never have Imelda's last name. The reporter on the screen thrust a microphone toward Catherine. "Mrs. Blackwood Iphigenia, congratulations on the merger. The stock is up 40% since you took over as CEO. That's unprecedented. How did you turn around a failing logistics branch so quickly while raising a newborn?" Imelda held his breath. The entire cafeteria seemed to lean in. Catherine smiled. It was the smile of a woman who had walked through fire and come out made of gold. "It came down to efficiency," she said, her voice clear and crisp. "We identified a significant amount of dead weight in management. Once we removed the toxicity and corruption, the company naturally corrected itself. It turns out you can't build a future when you're anchored to a dishonest past." "Dead weight," Imelda whispered. The words hit him like physical blows. She wasn't just talking about the company. She was talking about him. He was the toxicity. He was the anchor. "And," Catherine added, shifting the baby on her hip, "I had the best partner imaginable. Mr. Iphigenia has been a mentor and a grandfather figure to little Leo." Leo. His name was Leo. Imelda hadn't even known the name. The segment ended with Catherine ringing the opening bell, the sound echoing through the prison cafeteria like a death knell for Imelda's former life. "Man," his cellmate grunted, chewing on a piece of bread. "That lady is a shark. I wouldn't want to cross her." "I did," Imelda whispered, tears finally spilling over, hot and shameful. "I did." The final parcel. Later that afternoon, during mail call, The guard tossed a thick envelope onto Imelda's bunk. "Legal," the guard grunted. Imelda opened it with trembling hands. It was the final divorce decree. It was brutal in its efficiency. Catherine had utilized the morals clause in their prenuptial agreement, a clause Imelda had insisted on adding to protect his money years ago, to strip him of everything. The house, hers. The investments, seized for restitution to the company. The Bentley? Auctioned. He turned to the last page. There was a section titled, Personal Property Returned to Defendant. There was only one item listed. Item 1. 1-1. Bottle of Chateau Margaux, 2009. Opened, approx. 40% full. Corked. Confused, Imelda looked inside the larger padded envelope that had come with the papers. Wrapped in bubble wrap was the actual bottle of wine from that night at l'Orangerie. The wine he had ordered to impress his mistress. The wine he had been drinking when his life fell apart. Taped to the bottle was the receipt from the restaurant. It showed the declined transaction on his corporate card, and then the payment made by Alexander Iphigenia. But there was also a handwritten note on thick, cream-colored stationery. The handwriting was elegant, familiar, and final. Imelda, you always said you deserved only the finest things in life. You were willing to sacrifice your marriage, your integrity, and your child to chase an illusion of a better life. This bottle cost $4,300. It cost you your career. It cost you your freedom. It cost you your son. I thought you should have it. In here, it's the only luxury you'll taste for a long time. Drink it and remember the moment you lost it all. I'll be busy raising a good man, one who knows the value of loyalty. Goodbye. Catherine Imelda sat on the hard metal bunk, the cold glass of the bottle in his hand. He looked at the wine, dark and expensive, and then at the grey concrete walls of his cage. He had dined in luxury with a mistress, thinking he was a king. Now he was a pauper with a bottle of vinegar, while the queen he had discarded ruled the world. He didn't open the bottle. He placed it on the floor, laid back on the thin mattress, and stared at the ceiling, the silence of the cell deafening, interrupted only by the ghost of a laugh from a woman who had won the game he didn't even know he was playing. And that is the tragic, yet satisfying end of Imelda Blackwood. He learned the hard way that the grass isn't greener on the other side. It's greener where you water it. Catherine proved that the ultimate revenge isn't screaming or fighting. It's leveling up so high that your enemies can't even reach you. She turned her pain into an empire, while Imelda was left with nothing but a memory of the luxury he took for granted. Now, I have a question for you guys. Do you think Catherine went too far by sending him the wine bottle in prison, or was that the perfect chef's kiss of karma? And honestly, would you have forgiven him if he begged? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal and justice, please smash that like button. It helps the algorithm find more people who love drama. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Next week, we have a story about a lottery winner who dressed as a homeless man to test his greedy family. You won't want to miss the ending of that one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.